Hi, everybody. How are we doing? Did you guys enjoy the taping? Good. I was just saying to people, I can't believe it's June. Can you guys believe it? Hasn't time flown by? The year's just gone. Well, today we have with us Freddie Highmore, who you may have seen in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and as you just watched, BATES Motel. So if we can give a warm welcome to Freddie Highmore.
So we've got loads of water now. I didn't even need to bring one.
Just in case, we're in a drought, friends, so we're stocking up.
Is it true? Are they busing in water to LA?
I don't actually know that.
Someone told me that they're bringing in trucks there. There's so little water now.
We are
I don't know whether that was a myth or...
in a big water shortage. Actually, the Hollywood Reporter, where I work at, we did a story about how people in Beverly Hills are not flushing their toilets because there's no water. They're like, if it's yellow, let it mellow, you know? One of those.
No, we don't have that problem in Britain.
No. You guys get a fair amount of rain there. Well, welcome. We're glad that you're here. Thank you all for being here today to hear the conversation with him. To first kick things off, when did you first discover that you wanted to be an actor?
I guess there was never a one sort of moment where I was like, oh, this is what I want to do forever. And I guess it's never until very recently, because I graduated from university last summer, acting was almost never, sort of wasn't the focus of my life, or it wasn't, not that I didn't take it seriously, but it wasn't what I defined myself as growing up. You were just, you know, a normal kid who went to school and then was incredibly lucky to do films on the side, but it wasn't that we sort of moved out to LA and that was who I was full time. So I guess there's never been that moment of thinking, this is what I always want to do. Mm-hmm. It's more kind of happened over time, yeah.
Well, you were a child actor. Were your parents encouraging of you to be an actor, or were they hesitant about you entering the industry?
I don't know. My mum is an agent for actors. And so I guess in that way has always been incredibly supportive and I've been lucky to have her. But at the same time, my parents were more encouraging of other things than acting, and never wanted me to commit to just wanting to be an actor from a young age. And so the fact that I went to university and continued with my schooling was very much down to them having instilled that within me, and I would say the opposite really. Despite all the help that they have given me in acting, I'd say they'd have been more encouraging in me doing other things than sort of sending me off to do various projects. Yeah.
What was it that you studied in school, and why did you decide to study that?
I did Arabic and Spanish. So yeah, no real
connection at all.
No real link with acting. I enjoyed languages at school. In England, you sort of whittle it down quite early to a very few amount of subjects in your final 2 years. And so my last 2 years of school, I did French and Spanish and maths and further maths. So it was sort of lots of maths. But that was enough maths by that point when I was 18. So I did, I chose to do languages. And Arabic, I guess there was never... It was more out of a desire to learn a language that I wouldn't get another chance to study or pick up. And I figured another Romance language, living in Europe and having studied other ones of those, I could pick up more myself over time, whereas Arabic seemed that I would never otherwise do it. And then maybe I'll be a spy, or that's what people always say. You know, I'll be tapped up. There is a friend of mine, maybe I shouldn't be saying this, because then I'll be... And that we suspect, you know, like, maybe you've been, you know, tapped on the shoulder in last year Arabic class and said, would you come and work for Our Majesty? But that hasn't happened to me yet, or maybe it has. You know, this is just a facade of, I'm just checking up on the water shortage in LA under the guise of.
Very good. Well, you're from England, obviously. How did you transition from the acting industry in England to the United States? How did you make that jump?
I guess it was reasonably early. The first film I did that was set in England was a sort of worldwide, almost a kind of American production, Finding Neverland. And so in that way, it was always kind of combined immediately from that sort of worldwide perspective. And Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, again, he was a kind of British, shot in England and a British guy, but it wasn't sort of a film in England that then required a kind of later transition to America. So I've definitely worked more in America than in England over the years.
Do you live
It
here?
sounds like I'm very old. It's like,
Do you live here now, or where are you stationed? Have you made the full jump to the United States?
no, I still live in London.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And I guess, I mean, with Vancouver for Bates Motel, you end up spending quite a bit of time there, kind of 5 months per season. So now it's 15 months. This is my further maths coming in there. But yeah, apart from that, London. Yeah.
Okay. What do you see as your breakout moment?
I think Finding Neverland, which was the first big film the first big thing I'd done, really, and was just incredibly lucky to be the right age and fitting in to look vaguely like you could be Kate Winslet's son, and you were just lucky to get a chance to be in the film. And people thought, I mean, you couldn't really look bad looking, sitting there on a bench next to Johnny Depp. So I was very, very lucky just to be involved in the project, really, and that was what got everything going.
Was there ever, and this sometimes happens with child actors, you'll have a really high peak when you're a child actor, and then transitioning into adulthood, you kind of plateau. Did you ever have that moment when you kind of got into a little slump, and how did you get out of that?
I didn't do any, but it was more out of choice of wanting to focus on my studies. So I did a film called The Art of Getting By when I was 18, just before I finished school. And then after that, I didn't do anything before Bates Motel, and spent those next 2 years at Cambridge and just focusing entirely on the university course. And then Bates Motel came along, and I guess in a way the television show has been great in showing a transition, because you just get older as the seasons go by, and so without really thinking of attempting to look older or searching out more adult roles, Norman just grows up over the years, and people watch that. So that's also been a transition, just doing the show itself.
Are there specific acting classes or training that you took or are taking that you recommend also to actors?
I've never had any training or acting, so maybe I can get recommendations from others. If probably the other way around. No, I've never done theatre, and I figure that to do that, there's a certain amount of training that one would need. And for various projects, of course, voice work and for accent training and stuff when I was younger. And nowadays, I guess my way of approaching that is just trying to stay in the American accent as much as possible when on set and in Vancouver in general, so that it becomes second nature. And I don't know if that's following any particular sage acting recommendations, but that's what I've found to be useful. And then I think it was more learning from people that you were opposite and watching what other people were doing and thinking, oh, you're really brilliant at this, and kind of copying and just trying to be as natural as possible. And that's what I've always, just so it feels real and it sounds really or slightly indulgent, just keep it real, but just so that it is something that you're genuinely feeling as opposed to ever forcing it or attempting to act. I mean, that's what I've always, in some way, thought to be the secret of acting, is just don't act. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Do you have a coach? Is like any direction at all, or?
Not for acting. No, I've never had. No, just the voice, just accent stuff over the years, and for a couple, there was a film called August Rush where I had to play the guitar and conduct, and so for that I did various musical training. Okay. Yeah, to learn the guitar so I could, and the conducting. Yeah.
I think a lot of actors want to know what's the trick of getting an agent. How do you get an agent? How was that process for you? I mean, obviously it was different. You were a child actor, but how did you go about getting an agent?
Also, my mum is an agent, so in that way it was a... so I've never... And only very recently, I was very lucky to have her. And then only this year, for the first time, I've had an American agent, so... I don't really know how to answer your question in any other way. Yes.
I guess we'll switch it around a little bit then. What advice do you give to actors to get an agent?
I'm not really the person to ask for this sort of advice, am I? I mean, I can make things up and I don't know. I mean, I just remember Finding Neverland being just many auditions. Mm-hmm. And so, of course, I was incredibly lucky to have my mum there, but it was certainly, 6 times that you'd go back and kind of get through the process, and eventually you're lucky to be chosen. Yeah.
Do you get nervous in the auditioning room? And if you do, what do you do to calm those nerves?
No, I find that I always prepare quite a lot. I mean, in general as well, just filming on a day-to-day basis. And so it's so ingrained or rehearsed in your mind that even if you are nervous, your brain automatically will carry on doing something that you have practiced. Mm-hmm. And not that it isn't real in that moment and you're on autopilot, but that you're not struggling to think of the line or think of something that you have written on your notes, whatever it is, because you know that it's going to be there and you don't really have to worry about that. Mm-hmm. So I guess it's having the basis there and knowing that that will be enough to get you through whatever, because you have prepared enough to be able to fall back on that if anything else.
Right. So you co-star on Bates Motel, as everyone just saw, which is now in its 3rd season, so congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
It's a big accomplishment. Tell us about auditioning for Norman, who is quite a dark character. What did you go through to prepare for that role, to audition for that?
I was in Kuwait, actually, on my year abroad, which always amuses Carlton and Kerry, the writers and producers of the show, that I was there doing an internship as part of the course, and were Skyping them, and they were like, we need to get him out of Kuwait, like, let's come to Vancouver. And then we managed to work it out with school and everything, that I'd be able to complete my studies at the same time as doing the seasons alongside it. So I guess that was an odd process, being so far away. It wasn't, I'd never met them in person before starting, or Vera either. Mm-hmm.
So how did you prepare for that? Like, what mindset did you get into? Did you research? Did you watch Psycho?
Yeah, I rewatched Psycho, and I guess you just, at the heart of it is just you try and relate to him, and certainly at the start of Bates Motel, he wasn't this horrible, I mean, I'm not sure he ever will become that, but this horrible, heartless serial killer. He was just a guy who's a little bit messed up and maybe too close to his mother, but he was still a nice guy. And I guess this season is the first time where I've you change that tune that you would always say to people, oh no, but Norman's nice, like he's really lovely, and maybe by the end of the third season he's not quite as lovely as he once was, but at the start it was more playing against people's expectations of the character as opposed to playing into them or making them exaggerating them. Because people always arrive at Bates Motel, or pretty much everyone, with the knowledge of who Norman Bates is and having this psycho mythology behind him, so that if you say, oh no, he's really sweet, it's much stronger than having someone just play, and which was why Anthony Perkins' original performance was so brilliant, because you didn't suspect him. He wasn't as a, if you're a burglar, you don't really run around with a sort of black bag and like stripy, like black and white clothes, because it wouldn't be very good. But so it's, and I guess that's also something that I've applied to everything that I've done. That sense of trying to play against the emotion as opposed to playing into it, because it just seems much more real, and that's what people seem to do on a day-to-day basis, as opposed to indulging in it, whatever emotion the character's meant to be feeling. Because if you're crying, most of the time you don't want to cry. You're not trying to break down in front of someone. You're trying to do the complete opposite and hold it together. And so I guess that applies equally to with Norman Bates playing against those expectations, and it's stronger and more believable.
Did Vera give you any advice when you first started? I mean, she's a seasoned actress. Did she give you any advice about starring in a TV show?
No, it was the first, I think she'd done, but she hadn't worked loads in television either, I don't think. And it was the first television show that I'd done. But it's funny looking back, because we know each other so well now, and you work together and become incredibly close. But we'd only met for one afternoon before we started shooting. So it's funny to imagine what that first day would have been like when you are just so used to working with someone now. And it would be interesting to go back and see where we began. But I guess it just clicked from the start, and we had the same approach to how their relationship should be, and then at the beginning anyway, and then that changes over time.
How have you seen yourself grow over the show over the past 3 seasons from the start? Are there things that you look back now and say, oh, I wish that I had changed that because I'm doing it now this way differently?
No, not really. And that's one, I haven't really rewatched the seasons as such and sort of critiquing or criticizing performances from earlier and thinking, oh, I should have done that differently. But in any case, the character changes so much that it doesn't matter if he was different at the beginning. And of course, I've become, in my personal life, you mature over those years and you graduate and you get older, and Norman has too. So I guess in some ways maybe those paths are mirrored. They were different circumstances, and my mom is very different to Norma. But no, and that's something I feel that we're really lucky to have on Bates Motel, for it being a television show, that the characters do develop so much, and that, especially for me, there's a clearly defined path that I could aim for from the beginning, as opposed to being on a show where you're not sure if your character is a good guy or a bad guy, because the writers haven't actually decided yet, and so you're kind of playing it somewhere in the middle, thinking, well, I guess I'll be safe whichever way they choose to go. But with Norman, it was plotting that transition from the beginning, and seeing that development and wanting that development to come over time, as opposed to feeling that he's got to remain this same person over the course of all of the seasons.
Right. So you started in a number of children's films. How was that transition from child actor to being taken seriously as an adult actor? Did you struggle with that at all, or find that people in the industry struggled with seeing that transition?
I'm not sure. I never I never saw it as, people always mention it and people always talk about it, of the transition, but I didn't find it to be particularly problematic or something that I was always concerned about. It just seemed normal that as you get older, you would start playing older characters and people would see you. And I don't know, I never, especially as maybe because as a kid, there's a similar difference from someone who's 10 or 9 years old and Finding Neverland to then, 14, 15 years old. And those characters are so different anyway that I figure that transition is always happening as a kid. It's not just sort of child to adult. It's as a kid, you're every year you're getting too old for a part that you would have been right for, just a year or a bit earlier. So maybe you're just used to that sense of growing older. And I don't know why suddenly at like 18, it's like, oh, now I'm 19. I don't know what I'm going to do with myself. I'm an adult now. I can't play this character anymore. So I've always seen it like that, yeah.
Is there an actor or actress that you look up to as motivation, and why that person?
Vera, just because we haven't spoken about her, and she's wonderful and just brilliant on Bates Motel. And so, out of everyone I've worked with, is the most sort of seemingly effortless actress, and so natural and able to sort of do so much yet ground it all in reality. Because I guess lots of actors are brilliant, and she not that she doesn't underplay things, but she also, as Norma, is able to overplay things and it still be just as believable and just as heartbreaking. And I think it's a really amazing talent that I've always admired that she's had, and particularly with Norma, who can be so big and over the top, and Norma can pull faces, and Vera's not pulling a face, but Norma's pulling a face, and Vera manages to pull that off without it seeming false or fake or that she's acting, but she can get across the sensation all the time that Norma is being performative and giving a performance to others. And I've always found that to be amazing.
Is there a male actor that you look up to? I mean, this year at the Oscars, it really was the year of the Brits. We saw Eddie Redmayne, Benedict Cumberbatch. Like, there were a lot of front runners that are from England. Are any of them encouragement to you, or do you look up to any of them?
Yes, I of course, and you recognise that they're such amazing British actors that are few years older than you, and you think, oh wow, you're in an amazing place for actors to develop, maybe. But I guess I've always looked up to most people that I've worked with and that and of course you can admire a performance and think, oh, Eddie Redmayne is brilliant, but it's somewhat from a detached point of view of never having met the person. And so I think growing up it was more heroes or people I looked up to were those who I'd worked with, and Johnny Depp, because I'd managed from an early age with Finding Neverland and Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, worked with him twice in reasonably quick succession, was always an inspiration.
What is the best piece of advice that you've received about your career as an actor?
I don't know. The best piece of advice. I mean, it's sort of, there's the first thing that popped into my mind, which is slightly evasive and and at the same time something we've already said, but it was definitely that as a kid of not doing acting, and the advice to not. And I think it's different when you're older, and you're more sort of fully formed in your opinions and you know exactly what you want to do with your life. But certainly to other kids who want to get into acting, I would always say, well, don't just do that. Don't just, you don't know exactly what it is that you want to do, and keep your options open somewhat, and don't, as my parents never did, kind of say, oh, give the advice to your kid that this is all that you want to be, and make them sort of feel defined by that from an early age. So in a way, the best advice was just do other things too. And just purely from which I've only slightly realized recently, leaving university, and you draw on your own experiences all the time when you're acting. And you think, well, if you didn't have these experiences, if all you did was sort of go from one acting job after another, what would you have left to draw on, or what would be these the things in your real life that you find to be true, and how you watch people interact, and experiences that you've had and that you put into your characters, the ways that you understand humans. And if you didn't have any of those experiences, then you wouldn't really know what to do. Right. Yeah.
Was there a point in your career that you said, I don't want to do this anymore, it's too hard, it's easier to just have a day job and have a salary and be able to pay the bills and afford bottled water? Like, was there ever that point that you said that?
No, well, you see, we got all the tap water in England, so it was just, we're sorted, Not particularly, and again, because, not to always make the same point, but because I never, because I didn't see that was exactly what I wanted to do, I never felt the pressure to have to succeed in acting, because I always had in my mind, there are so many other things that I would like, not that I could do, or if someone sort of forced me into doing something else, I could just about get by. There are so many things that you'd like to do, and other things that you would find interesting in the world. And so I was never guided by this fear of not being able to act, because I wouldn't know what else to do with myself. And so I guess I'm lucky in that way. And lots of people I know find acting to be something that they feel they have to do in order to fulfill themselves, and I guess it's something that people often mention about the arts, like, but if I don't do this, then I won't be satisfied. Like, this is my calling. This is what I'm here to do. But I've never had that. Yeah. Not that I don't enjoy acting, but I've never thought that was my reason to be here, that I must grace people with my acting. Otherwise, yeah.
Well, we have some questions from the audience members. Joy Christie asked, did you ever have a role, stage or screen, where you had difficulty with your lines, memorizing or fully understanding the moments? And how did you push through it?
I guess, first of all, I've been very lucky to have worked on incredibly well-written things, and so I wouldn't want to criticize the brilliant writers that you've been working with by saying, there wasn't very, Bates Motel, it's not very well written, but we do our best. We get by, and we make the most of what we're given. But in terms of memories, in terms of memorizing lines, not particularly. And I guess it's just always finding instead of just sitting down and learning the lines without sort of putting much thought into it, almost the lines, sometimes if you start early enough in the process, the lines will just be learnt by the time that you get to do it without actually sitting down, because you've thought about the scene and you have thought about all the various transitions that take place and where the scene will end. And I mean, maybe one thing that's trickier on Bates Motel that Vera and I have spoken about is not wanting to repeat moments. And the writing helps enormously because the characters move along reasonably quickly and the relationships are constantly changing. But of course, as happens in real life, you will fight Norma. Norman will fight many times and over different things, but there'll be a fight. And I'd never want to sort of get to the set and to feel that the scene was already done or you knew how it was going to be. It would be sad if kind of Vera and I just showed up and we're like, oh, yeah, another one of these scenes. Like, we know how it's going to go. So I think, in a way, your options get more and more limited over time in a television show because you don't want to repeat exactly what you've done before, or at least you're searching for new solutions to things and new resolutions to how a fight might happen, as opposed to just relying on stuff that you've done before, if that makes sense. So maybe that's one of the trickier things of working on a television show, to make sure that everything is always fresh and different and real, as opposed to just switching into, oh, this scene, we resolved this one before by using this out, and we know that worked, so let's just do it again. It's more, oh no, but the characters have changed now, and you've got to find a new way of dealing with it. And in the third season of Bates Motel, there's much more, Norman becomes much more manipulative by the end, and the balance of power shifts towards him as opposed to, and away from her. And so that meant that scenes in the past that would have ended a certain way had to be, you kind of relearn how to solve them.
Sherry asked, what was the most difficult part of creating this character?
Maybe not doing too much, or you get the role of Norman Bates, and the writers must have had exactly the same feeling too, that you're working on Bates Motel and he's going to go psycho and he's going to dress up in his mum's clothes, he's going to put on the wig and run around, and your sort of first thought is like, oh, let's just get straight into it. But it's much more rewarding and sort of delicious to play it out over time, and the third season is a real payoff for that build-up in the first two seasons. But of course, you're tempted from the start to, I was going to say to like jump into bed with Norma or with Vera, but you're tempted from the start to push their relationships in the way that you know one day it will get there. But it's that thing of holding back and suggesting at what's to come and keeping that tension there, as opposed to doing too much too soon.
Colleen asked, what is one thing you know about acting and the biz that you wish you knew when you first started?
I really don't know. Something I wish I knew. I'm really not sure what I would have. I think my parents were very honest in some ways, and that was part of them not pushing me down it. They didn't. They never kind of built it up to being this like great thing to do, and were always keen to impress upon me the difficulties that it has. But then I guess you can never really, you just have to learn it yourself. And I guess as you get older, you look back and think, oh, well, you could never really have known. And I know I haven't said like known what yet, but but you could never, I don't know, I just mean in general, it's easy to look back and be like, oh, I wish I'd have known this, but really you could never have known that. And so there's not much point if you do have a regret of thinking, oh, but I wish I should have done it differently, because it kind of goes back to this classic thing that everyone has in life of, being old and thinking, oh, but if I had those years again, I know I'm only 23, but you still look back and like, oh, but those university years where they just went by so quickly and they've just gone. And you kind of wish you'd known it, or that you'd had a greater appreciation of that at the time. But you'll never have that, so you just carry on.
Was there something about the industry that you found surprising?
No, I mean, I guess I was incredibly lucky, and I mean that was a surprise, I guess, that I was able to do so many things so quickly, and I guess that's just the way that the industry works. That you get like one film and it does really well, and then suddenly there's loads more opportunities that are presented to you, and that's a slightly bizarre industry, I guess, to work in, where this one moment can change everything so quickly in a way that it doesn't in other places that are more a sort of true meritocracy of working your way up, and that you deserve to be somewhere by the end, when you can just be incredibly lucky and get to where you want to be.
Victor asked, what would you have done different if you weren't an actor?
I'm not sure. I worked in a law firm on my year abroad in Madrid for 9 months. So I guess that was something that I was thinking of doing. And languages, I mean, I think I've always enjoyed different cultures and different people and traveling, and not that I would have wanted to be a translator in the EU or, the UN, like just sitting down and constantly, listening to someone else and translating, but maybe something that involved languages and travel. Or a spy. Yes, or a spy. So yeah, no, I don't think it's not a good life being a spy, is it? It's not. It isn't. No.
You'd much rather
just
act
be
as a
always
spy.
away. Yeah. I mean, if you're in Vancouver, I mean, of course, we're incredibly lucky to be there, and maybe that's the one. If there's one downside of it all, is that, especially as you get older, as I'm speaking, everyone is probably like older than me. I'm like, but as you all age, and those moments of being away, like being a spy, when you wouldn't even be able to communicate with anyone else, or my other life as an actor, and you're being away. The joy of living in Vancouver for 5 months, you can see sort of fast approaching a time when you'd actually prefer to work at home, and that sense of wanting to go out and explore the world and be everywhere. And as a kid, it was almost the perfect time to do it. That I got to grow up working in so many different places without having any responsibilities back home in England, or kids of my own kids that you'd want to be with and see growing up every day. It wasn't that you'd sort of shoot in Vancouver and come back 5 months later, and my 1-month-old kid is suddenly like, oh, but I've missed these years. But I guess that's the one downside maybe of being able to travel so much, is that you can see a time when you want to go back to having a more stable career and job. But I guess, we'll see. I mean, I'm also interested in doing other things beside acting. I'm going to write an episode of Bates Motel in the 4th season, which will be great. And I wrote a comedy pilot as well, with which NBC never ended up sort of picking up to make into the full pilot, but they commissioned this idea that Kerry, the executive producer, and I did last year. So I'm keen to explore other things within the industry. And I feel also that having always combined acting with something else, there's a certain part of me, especially after Bates Motel this year, that you think, oh, when am I going to go back to my normal life? Like, when am I'm going back to England, and I've been doing this TV sort of 6-part BBC series in England recently. But you do get this sense of, oh, but when am I going to like settle back into, you think, oh, maybe I should do a master's, or like go back and do a PhD and have that sense of structure again that's suddenly so lacking, having been used to that for so long. So in a way, I think writing and producing and being part of a project over a much longer term gives a greater sense of stability if you're lucky enough to succeed.
Last question. What advice do you have for actors about having a successful career as a working actor? I mean, I think it's recognizing that you're not sort of worse than. I think acting is at times can be sort of horribly personal in a way that other jobs aren't. That I don't think if you're working at a law firm and you sort of see someone else get this job that you didn't get, or that it's kind of less a personal thing. It's not. It doesn't feel like a personal rejection. It would be more a sense of, oh, that their skill set is slightly different, and it seems easier to see it in other places. Whereas I think acting, there's a tendency to think, oh, but there's something wrong with me. There's something wrong with me, kind of as a person, or if only I could change. If only I'd be, I could be different, and I could be. I don't know. I mean. I could suddenly become like 6'5", and So I think recognizing that, and that there's nothing sort of wrong with you, is a good step, just for being. I mean, not necessarily more successful, but certainly more happy as a person. Well, if we can give Freddie
thank you.
Big thank you. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Freddie.
Thank you. Thank you for your questions. No,